How many times, while sitting in the grips of our anxiety, have we uttered the words, "I hate this. I wish it would just go away"? Now, as we sit and we think about the words we're saying, we're actually trying to get rid of a part of ourselves. This anxiety, this sadness, the depression. Now, I understand it might be completely uncomfortable to sit with, but the deeper question when we're saying such words as "I hate this" or "I want it to go away" is, how do we get rid of a part of ourselves? Would we want to get rid of that part of ourselves? And what are the possibilities that that part of ourselves is actually here to reveal, to light a path on a way to heal? In today's episode, I sit with former therapist turned coach, Molly Birney, as we explore this deeper question as, why would we want to, and is that the path to freedom? Or is learning how to be with it the way to liberation? Welcome to Man Uncaved. My name is Shane Coyle. Welcome back. Welcome back. I am sitting today with Molly Birney, former therapist turned coach. So I think the question I want to start with is, usually it's the other way, right? People go from maybe a coach. I mean, I would gather they go from some type of coach to become a therapist. It seems like, and I guess in our understanding of how this goes, but you went the other way. So or I don't know if there is a right way. So let's just put that out.
Sure.
But kind of give a snapshot of what was that decision behind your becoming a coach?
Yeah, a lot of pieces to this. First of all, is that I'd worked with a coach since I was 20. My coach got me out of my first career, which was choral conducting, of all things. I was finishing a master's in choral conducting right before I got the master's in clinical psych. And my coach was telling me, "Are you done pretending to do whatever this is? You need to be coaching." And I had said to his face, "Coaching has no credibility." I said this to my coach.
Wow.
This is not a credible field. I think I was being sort of tongue in cheek, but that's fine for you. But for me, I need to do something serious with my life. And he sort of smirked at that. And he said, "Look, you should be working in human behavior." And so I went and got the master's in clinical psych. And after a few years with that under my belt, he said, "Are you done pretending to be a therapist? Are you ready to have the conversation you want to have?" And I had to look at the work I was doing as a therapist and watched how often I was tugging my reins, or how often my client was asking a follow-up question that I wanted to answer a little bit more cavalierly and with more directiveness, and how often I was biting my tongue. And there are plenty of therapists who coach and keep their license. For me, I had so much noise of like, "Oh no, if I say that, is that clinically inappropriate? Would this be something a coach says or what a therapist says?" I was so wrapped up in my noise that it robbed me of being present with my client. And I finally surrendered to my coach. I said, "Fine, yes, train me. Let's go the apprentice model. Let's do this." Because I was clear how much I was in my own internal conflict of like, can I say this? I want to speak the way I want to speak. And so this was just about freeing me up to integrate all parts of myself. I will say that there are plenty of clients that I work with, and it might look quite similar to therapy, but I get to bring a lot more of myself and my doggedness, my playfulness to the conversation. So in that sense, it's quite different.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it rings true for the straight talk therapy that you, or coaching that you do, which I love it because I think we're in agreement. There's some type of conscious shock to the system that needs to happen. And sometimes we need to hit it direct and we need to hit it raw, and we can move in the discomforts from that place, as opposed to the soft and gentle staying in some type of parameters, whether that's parameters of illusion parameters or we're making the parameters or whatever it is, right?
That's right.
There's definitely a risk taking into this work. I think we need to push the lines a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. And this certainly allows me the forum to do that without the noise. And that doesn't mean I'm not still discovering parameters. I mean, one of the things that I got to see in putting up this reel that we're going to talk about today was like, oh, there are some elements of this that are too in your face, that are quite provocative, which, I think that's playful. I also, my person took some liberties with the Zoom. So I think all that was a little bit more aggressive, but it allows for just a more authentic presentation of the work for me. So that's why I dig the title.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. I think that's a great segue. And I kind of will weave this into this post that I reposted on mine because I found truth to it as it resonates with me, obviously. And we'll uncover this a lot. For some people, had a little reaction to it, but the messaging behind it, I think, is really what I was connected to. So I'd love to kind of lead into that. It was related to anxiety, and I'll kind of let you kind of take the lead on this and kind of give the
Sure.
snapshot. We can, set the stage a little bit around that.
Yeah. Well, the post specifically was about a consultation that I'd had recently with a client who was asking, I'll ask in a consultation with a prospective client, how can I be of service? What are you looking to do? How would you know if this work was effective? And she said, well, my anxiety would be gone. And I had said sort of playfully, well, I need you to know, I want to shoot you straight. I have no ability to get rid of your anxiety. And I don't know that there's anyone out there who can. And she was shocked. I'm saying this again, sort of tongue in cheek, because of course, the work that I'm doing is of help to the anxiety. Like I wouldn't continue to get clients if I'm not helping you work with the anxiety and experience relief around it. But for her, the idea that it would be extinguished entirely if our work was successful, it's a theme I hear sometimes. That clients have an expectation that they're going to be able to amputate successfully some part of themselves, and that will allow them to move forward. When I can rewrite my story or cut off from my trauma, or when I can really wash my hands of that nasty anxiety or that shame, then I can move forward with my life. And I think this is a really common misconception. We can get into the reasons why we think that way, but
Sure.
Suffice to say, I was responding with look, the game is about making a relationship with our anxiety. So you can have it rather than it has you. But the idea that you're supposed to be able to get rid of this puts us in combat, in true conflict with ourselves, and convinced that some part of us shouldn't be there. So, then you have to live at war with yourself if you're striving to get rid of it. And the whole game is about how do we live in more peace? How do we live in more freedom? So anyway, that's the post. That's the gist of the post.
Yeah, well, I definitely in agreement with you. And as I was listening to your post, and I don't know if you know, and maybe you do actually, Rollo May was talking about this too, the meanings of anxiety, particularly with anxiety and the meanings to find out. It could lead to a sense of creativity. It could lead, so he looks at it from a very wide lens and a very narrow way of, I need to get rid of this. And again, I am in alliance with you because I don't know how do you get rid of these things, nor do particularly I want to, because there's such learning, there's such messaging behind that. And I think there's this, let me just get over these things. Let me get over this. Let me move my trauma. Let me move these things out of the way. And I'm just like, well, why don't we learn and understand the messaging? And it's kind of bringing that to your forefront. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No, I was just speaking to I think that's a really advanced and evolved place to be in being able to appreciate, my anxiety is information for me. Right. And I agree, whether we're looking at boredom or anxiety or fear or anything we're looking to get rid of, we can't be curious about anything we're trying to banish.
Right.
And the game here is curiosity. What does my fear have to tell me? And what is my anxiety trying to communicate? And what else is on the heels of this boredom or that shame or whatever it is that's showing up? And so much of this work, I don't care if it's coaching or therapy or fucking plant medicine, lots of directions you can go in here, but you have to be curious about whatever it is that you're studying. And if you're studying your thoughts, let's get curious about them. If you're studying your fear or anxiety or shame, curiosity is it. Again, as soon as we're trying to get rid of it, there is no room for that curiosity. There's this thing I'll talk about sometimes is that I playfully call it the step zero paradox, meaning before you actually start doing the work, here's the zero step, which is anything you're trying to get rid of. I'm trying to stop lying or stop this addiction or stop this thing. We first have to include it. We first have to be in embracing it and in relationship with it so that we can do the work of changing our relationship to it, because that's not possible if amputation is the only goal here.
Right. And I'm in agreement. I think the dismemberment of those is really the root of it anyway, is like we've been trying to dismember, or it became dismembered instead of learning from it. And it's so interesting. And you did in the post, and I want to kind of talk about that too, is Well, first of all, there was a lot of mixed feedback, which is fine.
There's a lot
Again,
of mixed feedback. Yeah.
that's okay. And again, I love the allowance of people having their experience. And it's not for us to tell them what their experience is. It's for us to sit in it. And I think that sense of curiosity gives them the invitation to challenge it. What about what I'm saying is evoking something? And what about that is with a sense of curiosity? So I do love that.
Right.
You did bring up something too, and it wasn't particularly at this individual. So we have to make this clear. And I think there was some feedback. It was like, why are you talking about this about your client? I was like, but that's not what I heard. It was like there is a system that kind of can create these conditionings of let's get rid of. And so maybe we can talk about that and the anger towards some of that stuff or the frustrations or.
Yeah. No, I think anger is valid. And this is some of the pushback I got is like, wait, why would you be angry at a client? Well, I'm absolutely not angry at the client. I'm angry at the system that perpetuated this misconception for her.
Right.
And yeah, Instagram, of course, I'm going to be a little provocative and start the real, like, I'm fucking mad about this. But if anyone is watching that and bananas enough to think that I would speak to a client that way, I think you might be missing the point of Instagram. But that's okay. That's okay. If you're seeing it that way, you're probably not my client. Let's be clear. But yeah, that there was a lot of pushback, and specifically from people with reported having acute anxiety and complex PTSD, anxiety, things like that, saying, no, I can't accept this as a part of myself. And how dare you suggest that I do? And I got to say, I tend to have a pretty peaceful approach to this. So I was surprised that even with how provocative and the video was, a lot of zooms and silliness, I was surprised to get that kind of response. And it made me really, really interested in my assumption is how identified you have to be with your anxiety and the idea of getting rid of it and being victimized by it too, that the idea of including it is offensive. That's my first interpretation. Maybe no meat on the bones to that. But I think it's really interesting taking a look at why that is such a dangerous idea to folks. And I think it's because it really is in conflict with everything our culture has taught us about how to evolve and how to succeed.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I mean, I grew up in the capitalist soup, right?
Yeah,
and we
of
have
course.
we get a lot of information about how to be successful, and not being anxious is part of how to be successful. By the way, I certainly got that message really clearly. And even though our culture has included anxiety to some degree, it's okay to talk about, I have social anxiety, or I have a diagnosis of anxiety. There is still the idea that we need to use the wellness industry to figure out how to get rid of this thing. Therapy is going to help me, get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I think also capitalism is really committed to this idea. You're a problem to solve. You better figure out how to solve that problem. You better, in fact, let me sell you the solution to that problem. Let me market you the problem that you don't actually have, and then I'm going to sell you the solution to that same problem you never had
great
in the
business.
first place.
Definitely for capitalism, it's a great business. You have a problem that can never be fixed, and we have the only solution.
I'm going to convince you that not only can it be fixed, but I have the solution for it. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm in total agreement with you. And this is where I think we align. When we're doing this work, obviously there's the micro, the macro lens to everything. And I came upon this thing where this gentleman was talking about what creates a dysfunction in a system. So that could be a family system. Obviously, we ourselves are a system. Society is a system. Relationships are a system. Everything is systematic. But what creates dysfunction is this abandonment in your pain or abandonment in your hurt. What creates a healthy system is we love you in your pain. So if you look at that from the lens of a society or even our own self, we are a system of communication within our own self. Learning to love that part of ourself or understand that part of ourselves with a sense of curiosity creates a healthy system. But like what you were going back a while ago is that if that is a part that we have to get rid of, we're in constant collision with ourself. And believe me, and I know probably you as me, as any human being out there, I have enough going on in collision with myself on a daily. I don't need another thing to hold on to and attach to. And speaking of attachment, that is so interesting because I think there is something we can use I can use these labels as an identity to attach to. And we can somehow hide behind these identities. These are the reasons why we cannot move forward or cannot succeed or cannot have that relationship, whatever is presented in front of us. And we will hide behind our own excuses without the sense of curiosity. Is that true?
Yeah,
Right.
it sort of begs the question, well, who would I be then without the anxiety? And there's
Right.
often fear about that. And
Yes.
somehow including the anxiety, even though like the illusion is like, let me get rid of this thing and then I'll be fine. There's often an enormous amount of anxiety about not having anxiety.
Yeah.
That when I work with clients and it starts to get better, some of the feedback I'll get instantly is, wait, who am I? I feel disoriented. Is this safe? Is this okay? I feel irresponsible, because we're so allied to who we were when we're listening to it, like it's credible. But yeah, we have a real conflict about like, am I supposed to get rid of this? But who will I be without it? And then I want to be allied to it. There's a lot of personal identification with our so-called pathology that's just part of our humanity. It needn't be bigger or smaller.
That's right. Yeah. And that repetitive pattern that keeps us stuck there, and just, that identity kind of regurgitation we attach to it, is this is who I am, and this is who I am. And it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because right, I love that question. It's like, well, what would be possible if that wasn't true? And you're not that. And bringing in that from the rear view to the frontal view, but just understanding the mechanisms of it.
Yeah. Well, this parlays into a bigger identity conversation. Like whoever you think you are is immediately a limitation. One of my favorite quotes, and I want to be clear before I provide this quote. I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a lot to love about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love that one of the things Ram Dass says is, look, you don't want to end up an alcoholic. You want to end up free.
Right.
That even with that title of alcoholic and sobriety and all of the positive things that come with that, there's a limit to any title we put on ourselves. There's something quite congested about that. And he's not saying you need to go out and drink necessarily. He's saying open up that identity. Get curious about what the identity costs you. If you are an anxious person, there are things that are going to cost you. If I have to be seen in any identity, if I need to be seen as smart right now, certain things I cannot say for fear of protecting that identity or for fear of risking that identity. So true freedom is the ability to show up using all parts of ourselves, including our anxiety and our shame, for goodness sake.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really what was calling me with your posts. Is just, first of all, I just love your straightforward talk. I tend to really love that. It's something that I inspire in mine, is being very direct as possible. I mean, obviously with gentleness. I think we can be direct, obviously, but the love needs to be felt, right? The connection needs to be felt underneath that.
If it's not present, that directiveness is abuse. If the love isn't there, it's just that direction. It's actually abuse.
Right. And I think, yeah, absolutely. Good point. And so making sure that is clear within our relationship, that we can allow the space to have that direct, because that it's coming from such a loving place. And that's what that post was really calling to me, is the micro, the macro. I mean, obviously you did point out, obviously it's unprecedented times. There's a lot going on in the world. We don't have to get into it. That's what you were talking about. We all know, we're all living it. However, yes, what is this teaching us? What is this learning? What are we learning here in our own healing? And actually, I'm a firm believer in that we have everything we need to actually heal. I think these are beautiful things to know, is that you have everything. I'm not giving you anything. I'm just pointing to it. We're just pointers.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Look at that. Did you see this?
One of my favorite things is I'll be coaching a client and I'm watching them nod. I'm like, by the way, you're nodding not because I'm blowing your mind here. I'm saying something you already know clearly.
Yes.
I'm affirming what you already know. So let's like ride on that particular wave.
Right. It's so interesting, because I know we're in the same lines of work, but obviously, yes, listening to someone talk and they're like, say if it's coming from the recovery, and I'm like, I'm feeling stuck. I'm not calling my sponsor. If you're looking from the recovery, I'm not calling my sponsor. I'm not doing the step works. I'm not doing this. I'm feeling stuck. I'm like, did you just hear what you're just saying? So what would be the solution? You already have the solution.
That's right.
Like, let's just pause and listen to what we're saying for a second. Did you hear what you're saying? Oh, so call your sponsor and do your step work, if that's the room I'm sitting in, or if the person I'm dealing with.
Right.
So and so if that is true, then really this understanding more of what is my own experience and what is my own process.
This is exactly the stuff. So I started this little weekly, what is it? It's like really my office hour. Folks can come. I'll do a little meditation and answer some questions for folks. It's a chance for people who are not familiar with my work to step into it a little bit. And one of the things we're doing is just a little bit of meditation practice at a time. And I love this idea of, can you just take a look at what's present? In our silence, with your eyes closed, if that's comfortable for you, in your stillness, what's here? Because we're so quick to get into, I want to start organizing it. I want to start labeling it. I want to start fixing it. I want to start clearing it out. Can you tolerate just the looking? Can we tolerate just the awareness as the dimmer switch increases and more light is shed in this room? We want to start organizing and cleaning and fixing. Tolerate more.
So beautiful.
Tolerate more. And not like tolerate from like, suffering, but can you tolerate the peace and the stillness before taking action? That's really the piece that's often missing in our ability to sit with our anxiety, because we think including the anxiety, making room for it or whatever, that it's going to be either all consuming and dominating,
right,
or that we're going to somehow lose something in the process. I'm going to lose some control. And this is why our instinct when we feel anxious is always to push against it.
Right.
Every time I do a workshop, I'm nervous. Every time I do a podcast, I'm usually nervous. And at the beginning of most workshops, I will start by saying, I need you to know I'm anxious because I want to model what it looks like to not be pushing that away. If I was pushing it away, I then have to pretend like I'm not anxious. And you don't want to watch me pretend like I'm not anxious. You want to hear me coach. So in order for me to include that anxiety in the room and not have to pretend like it's not there, let me name it. So I'm anxious. We know I'm anxious. Can we fucking move forward now? We get on with it.
Right.
And that's being in relationship with it. But that only comes from that ability to slow down, be mindful and compassionate about what I'm seeing. My anxiety is here. Of course it belongs here. Wouldn't it be bizarre if I did a workshop and I wasn't anxious about
Absolutely.
it?
I don't care how many workshops you've done, right? Can you speak more and maybe what you're noticing too? Because you brought up a good point about the need to control and how there's a collision against that, I guess that fear response. Yeah.
When I talk about anxiety with my clients, and this is a coaching definition, this is not a clinical distinction, but I think of anxiety as the instinct the attempt to get control over something we have no business trying to control, whether it's the future or the outcome or what you think of me, trying to micromanage something I have no business trying to micromanage. And this is why, like, our instinct when we're trying to work with anxiety is get the control, as though that's going to extinguish the anxiety. And the game is actually, can I practice surrendering the control, which is the most counterintuitive thing we could possibly ask someone in high anxiety to do. I realize how absurd and offensive that can. What do you mean go into it? I've usually spent a decade surviving it by not going into it. That's why we do drugs and why we binge and why we have compulsive sex and why we gamble and why we do all the things we have to do to avoid it. What do you mean go into it? Are you insane? Yeah, a little bit. To suggest some of this counterintuitive stuff, we have to be, right? But that is the game. What happens if I orient towards it? And just that idea can be an overstimulating conversation for someone, which is why we come back to the mindfulness. What happens in your body when I just present the idea of moving towards it? Notice all the tension that, like, we haven't even done anything, and your shoulders are up around your ears, and there's survival is in play. So we want to get curious about these phenomenons, because you wouldn't choose to pay the coach and then resist everything the coach is suggesting.
Right.
You wouldn't put that on your to-do list. Only a crazy person would do it that way. And you're not crazy.
Right.
So, like, speaking to the piece of them that wants to be there and is hungry for a different experience, acknowledging the fear about including the anxiety and holding space for that whole dance. I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I'm sort of just riffing here. Forgive me.
No, I think you did. I mean, I connect to it again because I love the wide lens of understanding this. And I definitely agree with you on this way of approaching it from a different way and a different lens and connecting to it. Well, what we're talking about is a sense of more curiosity, a sense of I think it does. I think it pushes
Yeah.
up against survival just as a species. If I'm not in control, I'm going to die. I'm going to lose validation. I'm going to lose love. I'm going to lose something. And so if I hold on, then I can control outcomes, and then I can survive as a species. It's like all of these underlying needs, these basic needs as a species.
Totally.
Right?
And that really gets to the heart of what I was taught by my mentor, the guy who trained, like, he's been my coach forever. And he's a madman. I want to be clear. I come from the lineage of a madman. This is why it's good to have clinical training along with the insanity too. And I love Breck. Breck he's a phenomenal figure to me. But is the freedom work. And to me, I don't know that he would agree with this, but to me, one of the biggest components of the freedom work is freedom to lose. Freedom to let go. Because anything I have to have work, like if this podcast has to go well, then I can only say things that will make it go well. I can't take risks. I can't play. I can't tell you, like, oh, this thing I just thought of, we can't work organically. As soon as I'm attached to an outcome or a way I need to be seen or something, I'm going to suffer. So freedom to lose it all, freedom for this to go poorly, freedom for it to lose the relationship, freedom to lose the thing that your anxiety says you need to control. As soon as we're in relationship with loss, and can work with loss like it's a part of our curriculum rather than it's a mistake, we can start to get liberated. And again, that's not a therapeutic conversation. That's a coaching conversation, because not that it can't be therapeutic. Let me clarify. It's not a therapy conversation.
But I love that, the freedom to lose. You said something that was really interesting too. And, this idea of insane. It's insane to this counter way of approaching anxiety, but I think it's actually flipped, right? It's actually insane that you're fighting yourself. Actually, it's more sane to let go. And I did this interesting piece a while ago where it was, I always hear this idea of the awkward silence. And I'm like, but silence isn't awkward. It's actually awkward that we don't know how to sit in the silence. I think that's actually, it's like, I always like to play on these, like, it's not awkward to silence. Silence, there's nothing about silence that's awkward at all. It's just silence. There's nothing.
Shane, that's brilliant. What's awkward about awkward silence is not the silence. It's our commentary on silence. Our narrative. This shouldn't be happening. That's what's fucking awkward about it.
That's what's awkward. Silence, there's nothing to silence. Everything is neutral. It's the meaning you're making it, right? So it's like whatever you're implying to this neutral thing is your own story, and which could be creating more anxiety.
That's the game.
Stemming from, I know we just made references to, I did come from the AA community as well, and I love this idea is like to restore sanity is to understand the insanity in your own thinking. It's like we have to understand we are wild creatures, by the way, that are just our mind. We create problems that haven't happened yet. We don't know what's going on. We have a very limited frame of reference that we see life from. So we're not ever getting the whole picture of anything, actually. And we believe it to be true. And when we react on that, whatever my mind's telling me must be true, whatever I'm telling myself. And it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily true.
But that idea of like, you're not getting the whole picture. Like this is, tell me what you think about this. Cause I often think there are stages to this. Like Ram Dass too talks about, look, you have to become somebody and then you can become nobody. And I think a lot of what we're doing in therapy is becoming somebody, learning how to advocate for our needs and speak up and trust our boundaries, and get the result we want, take care of ourselves. But then freedom changes, then it becomes about, can I surrender all these components that I thought made me up? Not that we don't keep the boundaries or speak up, but can I hold all of that a little bit more loosely, a little bit more gently? And can I allow more loss and more curiosity in this process? Like becoming somebody process is, wait a second, I do see this clearly. I can trust how I see this. That's a valid stage. But the becoming nobody is, wait a second, I can't see any of this clearly. I'm making it all up. And that's liberating. But if you tell that to someone who's coming into the becoming somebody phase, it's the wrong fucking conversation. I can't tell someone who's never had any therapy and needs therapy, hey, you're imagining all this. That's an inappropriate intervention. That's a totally... Yeah. What a terrible gaslighting.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a great way of...
So the timing on this conversation is
wow. That was so meaningful, Molly, because I just love that direction as far as recognizing where this individual or individuals fall on, the spectrum of change and understanding where they are in their own development. So coming in, I don't have a me, I don't have a self, I don't know how to advocate. I'm boundaryless. I'm living in my shame. So it's like, how do we advocate through the boundaries, through understand internal, external boundaries, and then we can move into, which could seem so interesting, right? It's like, build this, now take it apart. It's like.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Look, this is why we have to change clinicians or therapists or coaches or guides, or why we need to diversify often. Because the person that helped you build it, or the conversation or the modality that helped you develop that self or get sober, that eventually has to fall apart. I can't tell you how often I, again, love the recovery programs. And I get a lot of people in my practice who are 10 or 15 years sober insisting, I still can't trust myself. Like, hold on a second. I think you've developed the right to trust yourself. When you came in to sobriety, you absolutely didn't. But if you're still believing that you haven't developed enough credibility to trust yourself, now we're staying arrested from exactly where you began. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So look, there's a time to trust ourselves. There's a time to surrender trust and defer to other people. And we want to know in the beginning and in the end, what's actually required here. Because you may have not started trusting yourself, you learned to trust yourself, and then you operate differently. So we want to allow the rules to change and evolve. Things have to fall away. Even the stick that you poke the fire with goes in the fire. All of these methods are traps and have to dismantle them eventually.
It's so good.
That might be too much. That's insane.
Oh, Molly, this is so rich and so good. I really love your wide lens. We really move when you can expand. Again, that idea is if we always are seeing our life from a frame, that our freedom is just outside that frame. If we can just see it we turn from a very two-dimensional to a multi-dimensional individual. And the more that you keep going down the journey is the more dimensions you can pull from and see from and understand from and feel from and be with and not be, it's like, but it's always this idea of, maybe it still serves a purpose, right? So if we're looking at it from the idea of the attachment and identity, so what's the purpose it's still holding for you? What are those gains that are associated with continuing to hide behind, say, if we're just looking from the anxiety, what is it serving? How does it serve? And what's the risk if you let that go, right? So it's like gain risks. It's like, because there's a certain risk, there's a fear that is coming. So if I let this go, what does that mean? I'm going to annihilate. I'm going to just dissolve into thin air. I'm not going to exist anymore.
And I'll hear all sorts of things. Some people think like the anxiety allows them to feel productive. It feels like they're doing something, like rearranging the furniture. Some of us, it allows us to feel like we're doing something. I have some role, or even if it's mundane, the obsession feels like it might be making progress in some way, even though it isn't. And some of us, just the habit of anxiety is what we're addicted to. That feels like, well, I'm an anxious person. This is what I do. Again, it feels so identified with it. It's hard to let that go. It can feel like a real threat to your identity to start to heal, let alone to learn that, this is a part of you and you can keep it. You don't have to get rid of it. By the way, you couldn't if you wanted to.
It's so interesting as we're talking about it, just something that landed as far as like, if that can move in somewhat of a distraction piece, right? It's almost like that can be our over obsession and driving a lot of whatever that might be, where we can obsess solely on that, because as it relates to the fear, well, what's underneath that? Now that's where the work is lying, but I could just focus here and I'll just focus on the top. I heard this, I don't know who it was. It might have been, I don't know if it's Richard Ward, but he had said something like the first part of life is developing the ego. So there's a sense of identity. The second part of life is learn how to become friends with your ego.
It's
like noticing, right? Like noticing the mechanism, and that is the becoming. The ego is the evolve. We need that. We can't survive without an ego. We need that. We wouldn't be able to make it as a species.
That's
so great, create it. Now let's unpack that and dissolve that. And so this is where it's like,
that is so much the
it's
work.
so confusing if you're on this journey. Wait, am I supposed to? Am I not supposed to? But I love what you really brought in. You spoke these words of like knowing where that person is and on their journey of healing, and honoring that space where they're at and meeting them there on that road, I think is really important.
Yeah, that is the work. And I relate to that. You and I we're what I love about you, Shane, is that you're doing this work and you're a living embodiment of it as well. And it's clear you're doing your own work while you're also facilitating this for your clients. But yeah, we're working with our own egos in this process. We don't get to amputate those either. We have to know where our zip code is.
Right.
We have to know like who our tax person is. We have to have these resources at our disposal. And the instinct often when it comes to personal growth or even spiritual development is, how do I transcend that? And I love your point. No, we fucking need that. That's essential. We don't get to get rid of that. That's an orienting piece. It's both. Can you use both? That's the game. Can you work with the duality of both going at the same time? And that's a tough one. It's a tough one. I also love what you said about like having to see the ego in play. And I say this to clients all the time. The first step to getting out of prison is agreeing that you're in prison. You can't get out of prison if you think you're free. I was talking to a client who's like, yeah, I keep, this is a client who's still becoming somebody. And she was talking about, I keep internet stalking my ex. And as I got in, I started coaching her on how to stop that. And I realized, she wasn't fully on board that this wasn't helpful behavior.
Oh, good.
But first, I got to back this up. And I got to get her to a point where she can agree, right, stalking my ex online that's prison. That's prison. And then we can develop I'm in prison right now, I'm doing the thing. And now I can stop doing the thing or make efforts. What do I have to feel if I'm not doing the thing? But yeah, if we can't see where our ego is in our way or have an awareness that it's even in play right now, we don't get free from it. The awareness is the first step to that liberation.
Oh, Molly. So beautiful, so rich. I love your approach because I resonate with all of it. So let's you talked about this before. What do you got going on? You talked about some sessions that people can get involved in. Tell us what you got going on right now.
Yeah, I have every Wednesday at noon Pacific, I offer what this is kind of cheesy. I always think it's cheesy when I say the name, but it's called In Practice with Molly. Come, do some practice with me. We do a little guided mindfulness practice. And again, I do it my way. So there's also some Q&A. So people bring in questions about their relationship, their meditation practice, their anxiety, questions about coaching. It's kind of a free-for-all. And it's usually a really little intimate group. So between 2 and 10. Where people are practicing together. And then I usually will do a lecture on a particular topic, answer some questions, and we're out in an hour. So that you can register through the link in my bio on Instagram, or if you go to the workshops on my website. That's a weekly offering. It's also a sliding scale. It's by donation. You can come for free. And then I have the living room starting in September, which is it's my 6-week coaching group. I offer it several times a year. Next one starts September 3rd.
It's right around the corner. Can't believe it. We're already almost there.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, and I'll have all the links down at the bottom. So if you didn't catch any of that, I'll have the links where you can get connected with Molly and hear her approach. I mean, again, directful, but with love and understanding. So it resonates with me. I really love that. So Molly, such a pleasure to have you. Always. I'm sure we'll probably do it many times because... Yes.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we'll end here. Again, my name is Shane. This is Men Uncaved. We need to come out of hiding.